Out of all the horror movies I usually talk about, Old Cheney here is usually the one that gets least amount of requests. But I being from Texas, I gotta represent, even if he's a cannibal. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot is going ahead full throttle. We've got bigger updates that this thing is actually pushing forward. I'm going to be breaking down all that information for you, but I really want to hear from you horror fans out there. Are you excited for another Texas Chainsaw movie to hit the big screen? Or like good old Leatherface's last movie, do you think he's a character now that just belongs on straight to DVD? So to bring you up to speed on this Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, if you didn't watch my last video, it's okay. You just hurt my feelings a little bit. This movie is being produced by Fed Alvarez, who got the whole project started. If you don't know, Fed Alvarez is responsible for some pretty great horror movies out there. You have the Evil Dead remake, and you also have Don't Breathe. It's a shame that he didn't decide to direct it himself, but I think after the bad taste in his mouth from the Evil Dead reactions, not that the movie was bad, but that people were just bashing it because it wasn't what people were expecting, even though I think it's a really great horror movie. And that was honestly all we knew about the project so far. They were just trying to bring this chainsaw maniac to the big screen until today, where we got a better understanding of where this movie is headed. They got a couple of brothers to direct this project, Ryan and Andy Tohill. The only thing we have to look into their background if they might be suitable for this is a movie entitled The Dig. It's gotten good reviews, and the most common comments I get is about their style of filmmaking, that it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's a lot of psychological torture as opposed to physical torture. But coming from Fed Alvarez, the producer who hired them, had this to say about why he chose these guys to direct. The Tohill's vision is exactly what the fans want. It's violent, exciting, and so depraved that it will stay with you forever. How did two little short sentences just get me so unbelievably hyped for a movie that I was just gonna check out once it was released? I do like those comments though, that he mentions exactly what the fans want. Lately, horror movies have been able to give the fans what they want. These iconic horror characters, well, thanks to the internet and people yelling out. But when it comes to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I really have a hard time figuring out what exactly it is that fans want. I mean, I enjoy the character a lot, but I think other than the most two recent reboots, or I should say remakes, that came out in the early 2000s, I don't see what else you could do with the character that fans would want other than violence and this guy running around with a chainsaw. But let's get on to that it is going to be violent and that it's going to stick with you forever really sets the bar pretty damn high, because Texas Chainsaw is known to be a pretty violent film. Don't even get me started on the exaggerated violence in some of the other movies with Matthew McConaughey just going crazy, or even just like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 where it was also over the top with a very unique flavor. I hope that this movie keeps it more grounded, sticks to a realistic atmosphere, and again, even though I'm a huge fan of the older movies, it actually is the rebooted movies in the early 2000s that came out that made me really be a fan of this Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I thought it was brutal, unforgiving, was so cruel to the victims. I would have hate to have been in their situation. And living in Texas, you drive by a lot of roads where it's nothing but desert and creeps standing outside begging for rides. Yo, I did not want to get Texas Chainsaw growing up. The other part in here that might be a little confusing if you've been following the Texas Chainsaw news, the Variety article who talks about the new directors who were hired mentions that this reboot is actually a full-on reboot. What I mean by that is when the news first came out a couple months ago, it was reported by Bloody Disgusting that this would actually be a direct sequel to the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. That we would see old Leatherface continuing on from the first film in a new story that, well, was already done before in Texas Chainsaw 3D, and if 3D being in the title doesn't tell you the quality of this movie, I mean, it had a famous rapper in it. That's all you need to know. When a horror movie puts in a famous rapper as one of the lead characters, it's done. You're over. You killed yourself. So now really this movie could be anything. It could be set in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, modern day. I would have to think maybe they'd want to set it modern day to bring new life to Texas Chainsaw. What would he be like in 2020? Would people cancel him, and would that make him put down the chainsaw? But whatever time period or plot they're going with, they want to set up a whole new franchise, meaning multiple sequels. You're not a horror icon unless you have about 4 or 5 movies just going off with 20 different timelines. Of course, that makes me extremely excited to hear multiple sequels coming from Texas Chainsaw. The only thing I would like about a Texas Chainsaw having multiple sequels and starting a franchise is I would like there to be one continuous villain. Because old Leatherface doesn't really have a main adversary that he always goes after. I mean, Freddy Krueger has Nancy, Pennywise has the Losers Club, Chucky has Andy Barkley, Jason has had about 2 or 3 different main adversaries, Michael Myers has the Strode family, Leatherface, has random citizens driving down a Texas road. But the final thing here, and this is probably where a lot of people are going to start clicking off, even though I don't think you have a reason to, I wouldn't mind them starting to explore aspects of Leatherface that are present even in the very first movie that are kind of ignored nowadays. Don't forget, this guy likes to rip faces off, put them on, wear makeup, put on a wig, even wear female clothing. That's a whole side to Leatherface that I would really like to be explored and figure out why. I mean, it's pretty obvious why he does that, but how does that connect to the reasons he does what he does? Are we just gonna get an origin story where we see him as a kid trying to deal with his sexuality and then goes, you know what, I don't want to deal with that, but I do want to pick up a chainsaw? If you hire directors who are known for good psychological thrills in their horror movies, then I don't see why you wouldn't do that. But that's just my opinion and some of the details concerning this new Texas Chainsaw reboot. They have directors. They're going to start casting soon. We're going to get locations. Plot details will be coming out. And if you want to be completely up to date, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that like button if you're still here. Lets me know people watch this long. Anything and everything. My name is Chris. Take care.